She stood there with her phone in one hand and entitlement in the other, glaring at my simple lawn chair like it was a national threat. Karen, our neighborhood tyrant, had finally reached her peak. I had placed a single white folding chair on the edge of my front yard, a harmless act, but enough for her to scream, "That's a code violation," and dial 911 like she was calling it a bank robbery. What she didn't know was this wasn't just any day. This was my wedding day, and the guests were already arriving, most of them in uniform. See, my bride and I had spent years in the force, and today our guest list looked like a police convention. So when the cruisers rolled up in response to Karen's call, the only thing more shocking than the number of badges stepping out was a smirk on the lead officer's face when he said, "Is this the emergency?" What followed was a spiral of embarrassment, twisted irony, and poetic justice that Karen never saw coming. And I didn't even have to lift a finger, just a chair. I had barely placed the lawn chair down when I heard the infamous nasal voice ring out from across the cul-de-sac. "Is that a lawn violation I see?" Karen Wellington stood with her arms crossed like she was a queen of the block, her tiny dog yapping at her feet like it too had authority. The chair hadn't even been sat on yet. Just a single white folding chair under the maple tree at the edge of my front yard. Nothing fancy, nothing illegal, but Karen's hawk eyes had clocked it the second the legs touched the grass. I turned slowly, already knowing what was coming, and forced a smile. "Afternoon, Karen. Is this really how you want to start your Saturday?" she snapped, marching across the street in her floral blouse that clashed with her personality. "It's just a chair," I said calmly, not wanting to escalate anything. I had bigger things on my mind, like getting married in 4 hours. Karen's eyes narrowed like she'd just uncovered some criminal operation. "Just a chair? That's city property. That strip between your fence and the sidewalk? That's public land. You can't just toss your trash there." I looked down at the chair. It wasn't even on the sidewalk. It was on the grass, nestled under the shade tree I planted 7 years ago. "Karen, it's a lawn chair for my uncle. He's in his 80s. He needs to sit somewhere shady." "There are community benches at the park," she snapped. "And HOA Code 13.7 prohibits placing personal furniture on non-private frontage." I stared at her. "Karen, it's for my wedding." She blinked. "Your what?" "My wedding. Today. Right here. Backyard ceremony. We got the permits and everything. It's happening in about," I checked my phone, 3 hours. Something flickered behind her eyes. A twitch. A moment of hesitation. But then her lips curled into a tight, fake smile. "Well, I didn't receive any notice about that." "You would have if you hadn't blocked every community email and banned our event flyer from the mailbox board." "That board is for official HOA business only," she hissed, gripping the leash of her dog tighter. The poor thing growled at the chair like it had committed some offense. I could feel the tension building already, but I didn't want to play into it. Not today. Not with family flying in, my fiancé setting up the flowers in the backyard, and the caterers just an hour away. I needed peace. So I stepped back. "You're welcome to stop by if you want. Karen, just don't bring this energy." Her jaw dropped like I'd insulted her honor. She spun on her heels and stormed off, muttering something about bylaws and citations under her breath. I watched her stump back into her perfectly manicured house, slam the door, and disappear. I sighed, shaking my head. Of course she would try something today. Backyard weddings were supposed to be easy, right? Casual, intimate, low stress. But ever since the invitations went out, Karen had made it her personal mission to insert herself into every step of the planning. From noise complaints during rehearsal to a full email blast accusing us of recklessly encouraging vehicular congestion on the block. My fiancée, Maria, had called her HOA Voldemort more than once. I walked back around to the backyard, where Maria was arranging the white lilies near the altar. Her hair was tied up, her sleeves rolled, and she looked up with that mix of amusement and concern I'd grown used to. "Karen." I nodded. "She thinks a lawn chair is a federal offense." Maria laughed. "Should have just told her the FBI was using it as a listening post." "She's not even trying to hide it anymore," I said. "You should have seen her face when I mentioned the wedding." "She'll calm down. Once the ceremony starts and everyone's smiling and being human, she'll realize she's not the center of the universe. I wasn't so sure. I had seen that look in Karen's eye before. That twitchy, itchy need to escalate things. And if there was one thing Karen knew how to do better than bake dry cookies for community meetings, it was dial 911 over nothing. Still, I brushed it off. We had tables to set, music to test, and family to greet. My brother Jeremy pulled into the driveway with a truckload of chairs. My cousins were blowing up balloons. Aunt Noreen was already trying to boss around the florist. Life was happening fast, and the buzz of celebration drowned out the background noise of HOA tyranny. Until the sirens came. They weren't loud, just that low wail in the distance. But I heard them. And more importantly, Karen had timed it perfectly. 2 police cruisers turned the corner of the cul-de-sac and rolled in like backup at a robbery scene. Neighbors peeked from windows. Kids paused their bikes. Even the caterers froze mid-tray. I stepped out front, already knowing what was coming, and there she was, Karen, standing in her driveway, hand on hip, Victoria's smirk painted across her face like she'd just won a legal battle. I recognized the first officer before he even stepped out. Officer Gabe Simmons, academy classmate, 10 years on the force. We'd trained in the same precinct and shared beers during overtime. He stepped out of the car, sunglasses on, scanning the situation with that neutral law enforcement look that I knew masked 1,000 thoughts. Behind him was Officer Riley, rookie, fresh out of training, still getting used to the weight of the badge, but sharp, respectful. I raised a hand. Gabe. He removed his sunglasses slowly, then gave a half smile. You've got to be kidding me. Karen marched forward like she was filing a class action lawsuit. Officers, thank goodness. I called you because this man, has placed illegal furniture on public property and is hosting a disruptive gathering without proper notice. Gabe looked at me, then at the chair, then back at Karen. Are you referring to that white folding chair under the tree? Yes, that's the one. It's blocking the visual flow of the neighborhood and violating frontage space. Riley looked confused. Visual flow. Karen nodded furiously. It's an obstruction and a danger to our property values. Not to mention the noise, the cars, the disturbance. Gabe looked at me again, raising an eyebrow. Your wedding today. I nodded. Backyard ceremony. Permits filed. HOA was notified. Karen here just doesn't like it. Karen gasped. I don't appreciate being lied about. Riley cleared his throat. Did you say this was an emergency? It is. Karen insisted. It's an assault on the peaceful appearance of our community. Gabe sighed and took a step closer to me, lowering his voice. You'd think after 20 years of service, I'd seen everything. I chuckled softly. And yet, here we are. He turned back to Karen. There's no criminal offense here. We're here because you dialed 911, which is reserved for emergencies. Code violations, if any, are handled by the HOA through proper notice, not police dispatch. Karen's face turned red. So you're not going to do anything. Gabe kept his cool. We're going to wish the groom a happy wedding and then leave. Riley nodded, giving me a polite smile. Congratulations. So... Karen sputtered, searching for something to throw next. But his using public shade for private use. I couldn't help it. I laughed, and not the polite kind, the real kind, the kind that catches you off guard and bursts out from deep inside. Gabe laughed too. Riley chuckled behind his notepad. Gabe leaned in closer and whispered, bet she didn't know half a guest list wears badges. Not yet, I grinned. As they walked back to the cruisers, Karen stormed back into her house, muttering something about filing a formal complaint with the city. But she looked shaken, deflated. For once, she hadn't won. And worse for her, this was just the start. Because what she didn't know, what she couldn't have predicted, was that she'd just made herself the star of every officer's small talk for the rest of the day. The guests started arriving in waves. Uniforms, dress blues, off-duty detectives in clean suits and mirrored sunglasses. My captain, Maria's sergeant, a retired K-9 handler who brought his German shepherd in a tuxedo bandana, and every single one of them parked on the street, she claimed with overcrowded. By the time the ceremony started, Karen had closed every curtain in her house. But she was watching. I could feel it. From the second-floor window, behind the blinds, like a villain peering out from her lair. We said our vows beneath the maple tree, the very one she'd once complained blocked her sunset view, and when I kissed Maria, applause erupted, a sea of badgers clapping and whooping like it was a victory parade. Later, during the backyard reception, I spotted Karen's husband, Harold, sneaking over. He handed me a wrapped gift and said, "I didn't vote for her." I smiled. "You still married her, though." He sighed. "My greatest regret." "Appreciate the gift," I said, tucking it under the table. "Tell her thanks." He nodded solemnly. She'll never admit it, but this is the quietest she's been in a decade. I couldn't resist one last glance toward her window. Still closed. Still watching. Maybe plotting. But today wasn't hers. Today was mine. And all it took was a chair. The morning after the wedding was oddly quiet. Not peaceful, not exactly. Just waiting. The kind of quiet that feels like it's listening. Maria was still asleep upstairs, her makeup half washed off from the chaos of last night, the scent of jasmine and bonfire smoke still clinging to her hair. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand, feeling like the final guest at a party I never wanted to end. The folding chair was still there under the maple tree, still standing, like a little flag of defiance. I smiled at it. Across the street, Karen's blinds were closed tight, but I knew she was awake. Knew she'd been up most of the night, seething. She'd lost, not just publicly, but epically, and not to some teenager throwing a party. No, she'd been humiliated in front of officers, detectives, community members, and her own husband, who had brought us a gift while she sulked behind curtains. I sat in the chair, not because I needed to, just because I could. 10 minutes later, the garage across the street rumbled open. I didn't look. I didn't need to. Her shoes clicked against the concrete. Deliberate. Sharp. She was walking across the street in her signature HOA strut, the one she used when filing complaints or inspecting mailboxes. I sipped my coffee and waited. "You do realize this isn't over," she said, standing right at the edge of my lawn. I looked up slowly, squinting in the morning sun. "Good morning to you too, Karen." "Don't play coy," she said. "You embarrass me. You turn my street into a police parade." I raised an eyebrow. "You called them." Her jaw tightened. "You manipulated the situation. You knew they were your friends. You set me up." I took another sip, trying not to laugh. "Karen, I got married. That was a setup." "You weaponized your wedding," she snapped. "And you're in violation of 3 separate HOA codes. Trash left on the curb overnight, decorative lighting not removed within 12 hours, and excessive foot traffic during non-visit hours." I blinked at her. "It's Sunday." She pulled out her phone. "I'm submitting formal fines. Starting now." I leaned forward. "You know they're not going to stand, right? We already submitted the waiver forms. Signed off by your HOA vice chair." Karen smirked. "Not anymore. The vice chair resigned this morning." That caught me. "What?" "Burnout, apparently," she said, tapping furiously on her screen. "That puts me back in interim control of approvals and enforcements." I stood up. "You're serious?" She looked me in the eye, unblinking. "You embarrass me in front of law enforcement. I'm going to remind you what neighborhood rules really mean." And just like that, she turned and walked off, phone still in hand. For a second, I thought about letting it go, about pretending this was just Karen being Karen, another control freak moment in a long list of HOA drama. But then I remembered her face when Gabe had told her off, the twitch in her eye, the public sting of defeat. No, this wasn't over. She was already planning her comeback, and something told me it wouldn't be a simple fine. By the time I walked back inside, Maria was awake, scrolling through her phone in bed. "You look like you just saw a ghost," she said. "I think we woke one up," I muttered. "Karen's back on her HOA throne." Maria groaned, flopping backward. "I thought we were done with her." "She's not done with us." Maria sat up. What did she do now? Filed fines. Claimed control of the HOA again. Said the vice chair resigned this morning. Maria narrowed her eyes. Rhonda? She loved her post. She said burnout. Maria was already dialing. No way. Rhonda's the most patient woman I've ever met. She put the call on speaker. It rang twice before a sleepy voice answered. Hello? Rhonda? It's Maria. Did you resign from the HOA? There was a pause. What? No. I sent her my attendance slip yesterday morning for next week's meeting. But Karen says you stepped down. I added. Rhonda snorted. She would. My email's been acting weird all weekend. She probably blocked it from the chain. Let me check something. Hold on. We waited. Maria looked at me. I could tell she was trying to stay calm, but the fire was building. Rhonda came back. Well, that's interesting. My HOA login isn't working. Says my password was changed. Maria sat up straight. She locked you out. Looks like it. And she sent an email to the board saying I'd formally stepped down due to personal conflicts. Maria whispered, Oh my God. I'm calling Jim, Rhonda said. He's the treasurer. If she booted me, she might have tried something with him too. The call ended. Maria stood up and grabbed her hoodie. We're not letting this slide. She's trying to retaliate, I said. She's trying to erase us. By noon, Rhonda confirmed it. Her account was locked. 2 other board members were mysteriously resigned via email they never sent, and Karen had declared herself interim president of the HOA again, using Emergency Protocol Clause 9.3, which was only supposed to be used in actual emergencies, like flood or fire. Apparently, embarrassment now qualified. We called our neighbor across the street, Benji, who had been recording security footage since Karen once accused his recycling bin of smelling suspicious. Benji was always happy to expose HOA overreach. I got her on cam talking to the mailman about removing flyers, he said. She also yelled at a teenager for riding a bike too fast. Said it threatened the structural harmony of the sidewalk. I'll send clips. By 3 p.m., we had digital receipts. But that wasn't enough. Karen wasn't just playing deity. She was rebuilding her kingdom. That night, flyers appeared on every doorstep. Cheap, black and white printouts with bold font. Community safety alert. It listed vague incidents, unauthorized guests, suspicious activity, non-residents loitering, all clearly referencing our wedding. She even mentioned unknown individuals with concealed weapons, an obvious jab at our uniformed guests. The bottom line read, Neighborhood Watch Initiative led by acting HOA President Karen Wellington. Maria was pacing in the kitchen, holding one of the flyers like it was radioactive. She's making it look like we're running a gang. I read it again. She used the word lawless gathering. Everyone there was either a cop or someone related to one. Maria snapped. And now she's forming a neighborhood watch to patrol us. That's when I had an idea. She wants a watch. I said, fine, let's give her one. An official one. Maria looked up. You mean? Exactly. By morning, we'd contacted our department's community liaison. Karen wasn't the only one who could play the safety game. The liaison loved the idea, organizing a formal police community engagement barbecue. Open invite. Full legal backing. Block party permit. We set it for next Saturday. Karen saw the signs go up the same day. Community Trust Barbecue, sponsored by local law enforcement. Free food, music, safety resources, K9 demo, and more. Karen nearly combusted. She stood at the end of her driveway, reading the sign we posted on the mailbox board like it had personally insulted her ancestors. She tore it down, so we put up 3 more. The neighborhood was buzzing. Even the neighbors who usually stayed out of HOA drama were suddenly interested. Kids were excited about the police dog. Old folks wanted hot dogs. Benji offered to DJ. Rhonda said she'd bake pies. Karen tried everything. Complained to the city. Claimed we didn't have HOA-approved signage. Said we were endangering pets with a K9 unit. But she had no authority. Not anymore. We'd caught her trying to block HOA emails, forge resignations, and weaponize bylaws. Rhonda and the others had reported her to the HOA Legal Advisory Committee. Her position was under review, but Karen didn't back down. She doubled down. 2 days before the barbecue, a city code inspector showed up at our house. "There's been a complaint about your fence being over 6 feet tall," he said. "It's 5'9", I replied. "She says you added spikes to the top." I took him around back. "Those are plastic bird deterrents. You can bend them." He bent one. "Yep, this'll get dismissed." As he left, I saw Karen watching from her porch, sipping tea like she just summoned a demon. "She's gonna keep sending people," Maria said. "I know. She's going to try and ruin the barbecue." "I know. But she's going to lose." "I know that too." The night before the barbecue, our doorbell rang. It was Gabe. "Thought I'd swing by," he said, holding a box of extra name tags and safety flyers. "Riley's printing the maps. We're doing a bike patrol demo for the kids." "You're a legend," I said, taking the box. He grinned. "You'd be amazed how many cops want to come now." Word got around about Karen. I laughed. "She's becoming famous." "Infamous," he corrected. "Someone's already made a meme." He showed me his phone. It was a screenshot of Karen yelling at the chair, captioned, "Sir, that chair looks like it has an attitude problem." I nearly dropped the box from laughing. Gabe leaned in. "We'll keep it professional tomorrow. But off the record, everyone's ready." That night, Maria and I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. The same rooftops Karen once claimed my flagpole ruined the view of. We held hands, said nothing, just listened to the crickets and the quiet hum of peace before the storm. She leaned on my shoulder. "Tomorrow's going to be good." I nodded. "It's going to be more than that." Because tomorrow, the whole block was going to see the difference between fear and community. And Karen, she was going to witness what it looked like when a neighborhood stood up with badges, barbecue, and bird deterrents. You could smell the chaos before you saw it. Bacon sizzled in the kitchen, roses were being arranged on tables, and somewhere near the back patio, a speaker tested out smooth jazz that made the atmosphere feel like a wedding teaser trailer. But none of that mattered because the storm that was Karen was brewing again. I was in the middle of placing name cards on the guest tables with Marcia when I saw Officer Reyes walk into the backyard holding a clipboard. I didn't have to ask. Karen had called again. "Let me guess," I said, walking toward him. "This time, my lawn chair's on national threat." Reyes chuckled, but he looked tired. "She says you've installed temporary seating structures without HOA approval, and get this, she believes they are secretly permanent fixtures meant to evade zoning rules." Marcia almost choked on her laughter. Did she fax and blueprints with that accusation? "She tried," Reyes sighed, "but she accidentally sent a fax to the town vet." I took a breath. I wasn't going to let Karen ruin today. Tomorrow was a wedding. Today was rehearsal. Family and friends were flying in. Caterers were setting up, and I wasn't about to let a neighborhood tyrant with a clipboard and a grudge control my peace. "What do you need from me, officer?" "Nothing. I already saw the chairs. They fold. End of story. But she's watching from her window with binoculars again. Just be aware." As he left, I turned to Marcia. "Why does it feel like I'm the star of some HOA-themed reality show called Survive Karen?" "She's just mad the lawn chair didn't match her paranoia," Marcia muttered. That night, the rehearsal went smoothly. My cousins tried their best not to get too drunk. My aunt managed not to comment on the dessert choice for once. And even my sister cried during the mock vows. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen had something else planned. The calm never lasted. The next morning, I was up at dawn. The sky was painted in soft peach hues, and dew still clung to the grass. I sipped my coffee quietly, looking out over the backyard where the white tent stood like a sleeping giant. It was going to be a perfect day, if Karen let it be. By 8 a.m., the first delivery trucks arrived. The photographer, a lean guy with a ponytail named Lewis, showed up early and started scouting for good light. At 9:30, my brother-in-law's band arrived and began sound checks, their soft strumming drifting like wind chimes through the neighborhood. At 10:15, I heard the first sign. It wasn't a siren. It wasn't yelling. It was silence. The kind of silence that arrives when someone kills a music. The band speaker cut out mid-chord. A slow hush followed. I looked over and saw her, Karen, walking straight into the yard like she owned it. She wasn't alone. 3 more HOA board members flanked her like backup singers in a music video from hell. One was filming. Another held a manila folder thick with documents. And Karen had a walkie-talkie in one hand and a smugness on her face so strong it could be bottled and sold. "This is a formal HOA intervention," she announced, her voice projecting like she was on stage. "You are in direct violation of multiple neighborhood codes." Lewis didn't stop snapping photos. He just leaned over and whispered, "Do you want me to get a few shots of the invaders?" Karen turned toward him. "This is private HOA business." "This is a wedding," I said, stepping forward. "You weren't invited. Please leave." Karen raised her walkie. "I've already notified law enforcement. You'll be cited for obstruction of inspection." "You called the cops on my wedding. Again?" I asked, blinking slowly. "I called them on your blatant disregard for community harmony," she replied. 15 minutes later, the police did show up, but Karen's face cracked like an eggshell when she saw who stepped out. It was Officer Reyes again, and with him, Officer Linda, Officer Paul, Officer Donnell, all off duty, all wedding guests. Karen stuttered, "Why are they here?" Reyes grinned. "I believe the term is ISVP'd." Karen's eyes widened. "You're fraternizing with violators." Linda took off her sunglasses and stepped forward. "You're standing on private property. You're not invited. That's trespassing." Karen's voice squeaked. "I'm the HOA president." Paul pulled out his phone. "Cool. Want to say that to a judge." The board members behind Karen began to scatter, one of them mumbling something about needing to check her dog. Karen wasn't done. She turned on me, pointing. "Your lawn chair placement is dangerously close to the community trail line, and your tent exceeds noise ordinance shade projections." Reyes turned to me. "That even mean anything?" "Nope," I replied, crossing my arms. She pulled out another document. "And your outdoor plug adapter doesn't have HOA-approved weather casing." Linda laughed out loud. "I'm giving you one final chance," Karen shrieked, "to take all this down, cancel your wedding, and file a community event application like everyone else." I tilted my head. "You mean like the one I filed 3 months ago that you accidentally shredded?" The look on her face? Priceless. Marcia stepped forward now. She'd had enough. "Karen," she said, voice calm but firm, "you're embarrassing yourself. You weren't invited. You were warned. And your obsession with lawn furniture is starting to feel clinical." Karen opened her mouth. And then, sprinklers went off. All of them. Apparently, my uncle had programmed the sprinkler system on a timer and forgot to turn it off. It soaked everything, including Karen. She stood in the middle of the yard, makeup running, hair plastered to her face, looking like a villain in a kid's cartoon who just got hit with a water balloon. Everyone froze. And then my cousin started clapping. One person joined. Then another, until nearly 30 people were applauding. Karen turned and ran, squeaking wet footsteps all the way across the lawn and out the gate. The next few hours were chaos, but the good kind. We got the chairs dried off. Someone brought extra fans, and the caterer surprised us with extra desserts to soak up the stress, as she called it. By the time the music started, you'd never know anything had gone wrong. As I stood at the altar, waiting for Marcia, I looked around. All the people who mattered were there. My friends, my family, even a few neighbors who'd once feared Karen but now stood proudly among us, smiling. Officer Reyes winked from the crowd. Linda gave me a thumbs up. Marcia walked down the aisle like the sun itself was walking beside her, and just as the officiant asked, "Does anyone object?" We all glanced toward Karen's house. Dark windows, closed curtains. No one called 911 this time. But even if they had, they were already here. When the police cruiser rolled out of the cul-de-sac with Karen in the back seat, still shouting about ordinances and respect, there was a moment of pure, stunned silence in the yard. Even the cicadas paused. Then, as if the weight of the entire day suddenly collapsed into one breath, my Uncle Brian raised his beer and bellowed, "Well, I'll be damned. Cheers to the bride and groom." Laughter exploded across the yard. My sister Ellie grabbed my hand and whispered, "Is this the wildest wedding ever, or what?" I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but when my eyes met Mason's across the crowd, I felt a deep calm settle inside me. His tux was dusted with cake crumbs, his tie half loosened, but his smile was exactly the anchor I needed. We had a wedding to finish. But something shifted after Karen was driven off. It was as if her absence gave everyone permission to finally exhale. The music swelled again, this time not interrupted. Aunt Rose jumped back into the conga line. Ellie gathered the flower girls and turned their giggles into a parade of flying petals. My cousin Jay, who hadn't smiled since his divorce, started dancing with my 80-year-old grandma. Meanwhile, Mason leaned toward Officer Delgado, who had stayed behind with two other off-duty guests. "Hey," Mason asked, still half in disbelief, "does this count as a first arrest at a wedding you've attended?" Delgado chuckled. "Not even close. But it's the first time the perp called us herself." Laughter again. Somehow, humor had become the way this strange chaos knitted itself into memory. Then a familiar low hum rumbled near the driveway. I turned and saw Karen's husband, Walter, pulling up in their massive SUV, face pale and eyes wide. He stepped out, a confused bundle of beige golf clothes and sweat, and spotted Mason. "Where's Karen?" he asked. I stepped forward before Mason could answer. "Arrested. Disturbing the peace, trespassing, and assault with a plastic flamingo. You can check the live stream. It's all there." He blinked. She got arrested." Delgado folded his arms. "We took statements from at least 20 guests. Video from 5 angles. Your wife called 911 on a legal, permitted event. Then she trespassed. Then she knocked over a table of champagne and assaulted an officer's wife with lawn decor." Walter looked like he was about to melt into the grass. "She told me it was just a code violation thing," he muttered. "Said she was handling it." "She handled it all right," I said, unable to resist. To his credit, Walter didn't try to argue. He glanced around, taking in the decorations, the music, the laughter, and the giant chalkboard that still read "Welcome to Mason and Lila's Backyard Wedding Bash." "I guess I should have stopped her," he said quietly. "I didn't know she'd taken it this far." Mason stepped beside me, voice calm but firm. "She's not just HOA president. She's a neighbor, a human being. She used her position to harass us. That can't just be waved off." Walter nodded slowly. "Understood." He looked genuinely ashamed as he turned back toward his car. "I'll figure it out. Good luck to you both." And then he was gone. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and strings of fairy light shimmered across the lawn, we finally had our first dance. My dress was stained at the hem. Mason's jacket had been borrowed by my cousin to warm her baby. There were petals scattered across the grass like confetti, a deflated flamingo floating in the pool, and somewhere, probably, my bouquet sat forgotten on a chair. But when Mason held me close, swaying slowly to the melody of our favorite song, it felt perfect. "This isn't how I pictured it," I murmured into his shoulder. He smiled, dipping me slightly. "It's better." A week later, the real shockwaves began. Karen's arrest made local news. Someone posted a video from the wedding to TikTok. It went viral overnight. Comments ranged from "Karen strikes again" to "This is peak neighborhood drama." Even a national outlet picked it up for a "Weddings Gone Wrong" segment. But more importantly, it triggered something deeper. Residents of our HOA, who had once whispered complaints behind closed doors, suddenly found their courage. The neighborhood Facebook group lit up. People shared stories, how Karen had fined them for flower colors, mailbox designs, or garden gnomes. One family posted how she had yelled at their autistic son for playing with chalk on the sidewalk. The tipping point came when a veteran neighbor, Mr. Langley, revealed that Karen had tried to get his American flag taken down 3 times. That post hit like a hammer. A group of residents began organizing a formal vote to remove Karen as president. They needed a certain percentage of signatures. They got double. The vote passed. Karen was officially ousted. Walter stepped down from his role as treasurer. A new board was elected, more balanced, more humane. And guess who they voted in as interim president? Ellie, my sister. "I'm just here to make sure no one gets tackled for owning a garden gnome," she said with a grin during her first speech. Meanwhile, Mason and I settled into our newlywed life. Our backyard, once a war zone of noise complaints and police visits, became a sanctuary. We held movie nights on a projector screen. Neighbors dropped by with homemade pies. The HOA even approved our application to build a small gazebo unanimously. One afternoon, months after the wedding, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. It was from Karen. It read, "Lila, I'm sorry. I lost sight of what matters. I let the rules become more important than the people. That's not leadership. That's fear. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted to say you were right to stand your ground. Take care. Karen." I sat with that letter for a long time. I didn't frame it, didn't burn it either. Just placed it in a drawer, beside our wedding photos and a dried rose from the cake table. A small reminder that people are complicated, that power can twist even good intentions, but also that change is possible. The story of our wedding was no longer one of chaos. It had become a legend in the neighborhood, a symbol of standing up, of not letting bullies hide behind bylaws. And every time someone asked, "Hey, aren't you the couple from the lawn chair video?" I smiled and nodded, because maybe a plastic flamingo started the fight. But love won it.